In this video, we're going to look at solving absolute value inequalities. And our particular problem for this video is 3 multiplied by the absolute value of x plus 7 is greater than 27. So just like with absolute value equations, the first thing we want to do is we want to get the absolute value term isolated on one side of the inequality. So right now the absolute value term is the absolute value of x plus 7, and the only thing keeping it from being isolated is the 3 being multiplied by it. So that's why we're going to divide both sides by 3. That's going to cancel that 3 out. So that's going to leave us with the absolute value of x plus 7. It's going to be greater than 27 divided by 3 is going to give us 9. And so now what we have to do is we have to interpret this. We have the absolute value being on the greater than side of the inequality. And so what that's saying is we want the distance from 0 to be more than 9. So if you kind of imagine on a number line, if we want the distance to be more than 9 from 0, you have 0 right there, we'll put a 9 and a negative 9. Then what we're interested in is we're interested in all the values that are bigger than 9 or less than negative 9, because we want the distance to be greater or more extreme than 9 from 0. So what we're going to have to do in this case, and anytime you have the absolute value term on the greater than side of the inequality, is you want to set up two inequalities to represent what we've drawn over here on the side. So we want to first of all say x plus 7, we want that to be bigger than 9. And that's represented by this right-hand interval that we shaded in. And the other one we want to set up is x plus 7, we want that to be less than negative 9, because we want it to be more extreme or to the left of negative 9. Because again, we're talking about distance from 0. So that represents the little interval I shaded on the left-hand side. So now we have two inequalities that we can solve. X plus 7 is greater than 9 and x plus 7 is less than negative 9. And we're going to solve each of those and write out the intervals, and that's going to give us our answer. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that number line now so we don't get confused here in a minute. So let's quote unquote solve each of these. So subtracting 7 from both sides in each case, we'll isolate the x. So in the first one, if we subtract 7 from both sides, it leaves x on the left-hand side, and it's going to be greater than 9 minus 7 is going to be 2. So we want all the numbers that are bigger than 2. So if we interpret that in terms of interval notation, that's going to be everything from 2 all the way to infinity. And we're not going to include the 2 because we have a strict greater than. So that's our first interval represented by the solution. So now let's go ahead and again, let's solve the second inequality. So we subtracted 7 again from both sides, and that's going to leave us with x on the left-hand side, less than negative 9 minus 7 more is going to give us negative 16. And so if we interpret that and write it in terms of interval notation, we want all of the values x that are less than negative 16. So that's going to be everything from negative infinity all the way to negative 16. Again, we don't want to include either of those values. You always put a parenthesis around infinity, but the negative 16, we're going to put a parenthesis around it because it is strictly x being less than negative 16. So 2 to infinity and negative infinity to negative 16, are going to be our two answer intervals. Now, if we wanted to draw that out on a number line, we could do it like this. Go ahead and draw your number line and put you a 0. And we can put 2 right here. So we want everything from 2 to infinity. So if we put a little parenthesis around the 2 and shade everything to the right, that represents everything from 2 to infinity. And we want everything from negative infinity to negative 16. Of course, if you wanted to count this off and make it accurate, you could. I'm just going to say negative 16 is about right there. And again, we want that little parenthesis, and we're going to shade everything to the left, representing everything less than negative 16. So there's your answer in interval notation and your answer kind of graphed.